The night before my birthday, I couldn't sleep. Something about the silence felt heavier than usual. The house creaked as if whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. At 3:17 a.m., I saw him, my late father, standing in the corner of my room, in the suit we buried him in. His face didn't move, but his voice, deep, low, familiar, echoed in my bones, not my ears. He said, "Don't wear the dress your daughter picked for you tomorrow." Then he vanished, like breath on a cold window. I didn't scream. I just sat still, clutching the edge of my blanket, listening to the silence that followed. It wasn't fear that filled me. It was something else, something colder, something I wouldn't understand until much later. By morning, the dream still lingered in my chest, like smoke refusing to clear. My daughter Layla arrived around noon with her husband and that tight smile she wears when she's pretending to care. She handed me a package, pale pink, wrapped in tissue, smelling faintly of lavender. "Wear this tonight," she said, not meeting my eyes. "It's from all of us. We want you to look special." I smiled politely, but my father's voice rang again, not as memory, but warning. I thanked her, placed the box beside my tea, and changed the subject. She didn't notice. They never do. That evening, I laid the dress across my bed. It was beautiful, no doubt. Delicate lace, soft fabric, expensive stitching, but something felt wrong, not in the material, but in the intention. My fingers traced the seams, looking for something out of place, something hidden, but there was nothing physical. The betrayal wasn't sewn into the dress. It was woven into the reason they wanted me to wear it, and yet, I wore it anyway, not out of trust, but to finally see. At the restaurant, the lighting was soft, the air thick with perfume and quiet laughter. My family filled the table. My son, my daughter, their spouses, a few friends I hadn't seen in years. They raised their glasses. "To the strongest woman we know," someone said. But I wasn't hearing them. I was watching their eyes, their subtle glances, the way Layla's husband kept checking his phone. Something wasn't right, and I knew, deep down, that the celebration wasn't about me. It was about what came after. Dessert hadn't even arrived when I excused myself. I went to the restroom, locked the door, and looked at myself in the mirror. The dress shimmered under the lights. But I didn't. I looked like a woman being dressed for something she didn't agree to. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from knowing that betrayal doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes, it tiptoes in wrapped in satin. I returned to the table, sat down, and smiled through the rest of the evening. I laughed when they made jokes. I hugged them when they handed me flowers. I let them think I was fooled. But in that final moment, when Layla kissed my cheek and whispered, "You really wore it," I knew everything I needed to know. I didn't ask. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand answers. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply walked away. I returned home in silence that night. The wind pressed against the windows like it, too, wanted to know what they'd done. My keys jingled softly as I unlocked the front door, and for a brief second, I hoped the house would still feel like mine, warm, welcoming, filled with echoes of laughter. But it didn't. It had gone quiet in a different way, not peaceful, hollow, like it had been waiting too long for people who never came back. This house wasn't just bricks and roof. It was a diary written with my hands. I remembered laying each tile in the kitchen while my children ran barefoot through puddles outside. I remembered holding my son on my hip, stirring a pot of lentils with one hand, humming lullabies into his hair. The staircase still creaked on the third step, the one my husband always skipped, joking it was cursed. We laughed so much here once. There were years where our home felt like a heartbeat, constant, alive, always giving. I made sure no one ever felt cold, hungry, or alone. There's still a pencil mark on the wall near the pantry. Every birthday I'd measure the kid's height and write the date beside it. I never wiped those marks off. I told myself one day they'd bring their own children, and we'd start the marks again. But no child has crossed this threshold in years. They prefer newer places, trendier spots. My house is too far, too old, too cluttered. I'm too much of everything they've outgrown. After my husband passed, I filled the silence with care. I polished the banisters, repainted the shutters, even kept his favorite mug clean on the shelf. I wasn't waiting for him to return. I just couldn't let his absence swallow the home we built together. My children said I was being dramatic, that I should sell it and move to a smaller place. But how do you sell the walls that know your tears? I remember one winter, the heater broke, money was tight, and we huddled around the fireplace with extra blankets and mugs of instant soup. Layla had fallen sick, and I stayed up 3 nights straight, cooling her fever with damp cloths and prayers. When she finally smiled again, I cried into her hair, whispering, "You're everything I ever wanted." I meant it. I meant it more than anything I'd ever said. But now, the same daughter avoids this house like it's haunted. My son says he's too busy to visit, always next week, next month, next never. They forget this home was built on the bones of my youth, that every chipped cup and faded curtain is a part of me. They've left behind. There's a garden in the back that used to bloom wild with marigolds. I planted it with hope, a place to sip morning tea and smile at the sun. Now it's overgrown, vines climbing like questions no one answers. I stood there last night, just watching the weeds take over, feeling like the house and I had become the same, kept alive out of duty, not love. This house knew lullabies and birthdays. It knew burnt toast and wedding invitations. It knew scraped knees, late-night movies, and the quiet rhythm of a family growing. Now it knows locked doors and silence. It used to be filled with love. Now it only remembered me. I wasn't born into comfort. Everything I had, I earned, with tired hands and a stubborn heart. I worked double shifts, skipped meals, wore the same old coat winter after winter, just so my children could have new shoes for school. I said no to myself so I could say yes to them. That was the rhythm of my life. Give, give, give. And I never once kept score. Because when you love like a mother does, you don't see sacrifice, you see purpose. I still remember the first time I held Layla in my arms. She had a birthmark near her collarbone that looked like a tiny moon. I kissed it every night until she grew too old to let me. And my son, Hamza, he was a quiet baby, always watching, always listening. He used to hold on to my finger even in his sleep, like he couldn't bear to let go. How strange that those same fingers now scroll past my messages as if they never mattered. I poured years into their education, not just school fees and uniforms, but late-night tutoring, handmade flashcards, and whispered encouragements through tears of frustration. I sold my jewelry to send Hamza to university abroad. I told everyone it was a proud moment, and it was. But what I didn't tell them was how quiet the house became without him. How I'd sometimes boil 2 eggs in the morning out of habit, only to eat one in silence. Layla wanted a fairy tale wedding. I stitched together every bit of savings, took a loan I didn't tell anyone about, and made sure she got the dress she dreamed of. I still remember her twirling in the mirror, tears in her eyes. "I look like a princess," she said, and in that moment, I forgot every ache in my bones. Her joy was my reward. Her smile made every sleepless night worth it. I cooked their favorite meals, celebrated their smallest victories, and stayed up during their darkest hours. When Hamza lost his first job, I held him while he cried. When Layla had a miscarriage, I didn't leave her side for a week. I was always the arms that caught them, even when I had nothing left to give. And now, they speak to me with the politeness reserved for strangers. Their words are rehearsed, their visits timed, their affection filtered through obligation. I've become a chore on their checklist, a duty to be done quickly, quietly, and then forgotten. It's not just about the money, though they took that too. It's the time, the years I gave them that I will never get back, the dreams I buried so theirs could bloom, the quiet tears, the unspoken exhaustion, the strength I offered so they could rise. I loved them beyond logic, beyond fairness. I gave without needing thanks. And yet, when I needed just a fraction of that love returned, when my body grew tired, when I fell ill, when I needed someone to hold my hand the way I had held theirs, they vanished behind excuses and silence. Not even guilt, just distance. They didn't just take what was mine, they took what I built for them. After that night in the restaurant, something inside me refused to settle. It wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. A mother knows when something is wrong. I had ignored that instinct too many times, making excuses for their absence, their coldness, their dismissive tone. But now, I let the silence speak. I began to look, not with suspicion, but with precision. It started with a missing document, a simple bank letter I used to keep in the drawer by my bedside. I remembered the envelope clearly, the logo embossed, the contents marked confidential. But when I searched for it, it was gone. I opened every drawer, every file, every box, under my bed, and with every opened corner of this house, I found pieces of myself, receipts from school fees I paid, handwritten notes from the children, old certificates I'd once hung on the wall. But no letter, no statement, just empty space where trust used to live. I didn't confront them, not yet. I visited the bank instead, alone, in silence, with a scarf wrapped tight over my head. The manager pulled up my account with polite hesitation, tapping on his keyboard while avoiding my eyes. "Ma'am, it says here, you granted power of attorney to your daughter 6 months ago." My hands stiffened. My voice did not rise. "I never signed that," I said quietly. He blinked, nervous now. "It's in the system." I asked to see the form, and there, under a shaky signature that mimicked mine just enough to fool the careless, was a forged consent, witnessed, notarized, and filed. The room went cold. My breath didn't catch it, crystallized into something sharper than pain, clarity. That same week, I asked an old friend of my late husband's, a retired notary, to help me comb through our legal records. The house deed had been quietly transferred 2 months ago, not sold, gifted, to Hamza. My name was still printed faintly beneath his, like a shadow fading from a wall. When I asked my friend to look deeper, he hesitated. "There's more," he said, and laid down the folder gently like it might burn us both. My life insurance beneficiary had been changed. So had my will. Documents I never touched had been updated. My signature was on all of them, except I never signed. I recognized the writing though. I recognized the loop of the letters, the slight slant, the way Layla used to write her lowercase g, like a musical note. She'd practiced copying my signature once when she was 10, giggling as she tried to forge a permission slip for a school trip. I had laughed with her back then. I didn't laugh now. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was architecture, a slow, calculated construction of betrayal. Every visit, every forced smile, every meal shared under the mask of family. It was part of the plan. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were erasing me in real time, signature by signature. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat in my living room that night, with the papers spread out before me, like the broken glass of a house, already looted. I poured myself tea.com hands, slow breath, and looked at the home I once called mine. They thought I was weak. They forgot who taught them strength. I did not tell anyone what I knew, not even the neighbors who often lingered near my gate, offering hollow greetings and long stares. Let them believe I was the same old woman, grieving, frail, lonely. It suited me, because while they saw the same wrinkled hands holding grocery bags, they didn't see what those hands were now building a plan, one stitched not with rage, but with reason. I lit a candle the next night and sat by the old wooden desk in my late husband's study, the same place where we used to balance checkbooks and discuss school fees. I opened the bottom drawer, the one that still smelled of ink and leather, and pulled out the worn business card of someone I hadn't spoken to in over 15 years. Tarek, my husband's old friend, a retired lawyer, discreet, loyal, the kind of man who didn't ask questions unless the answers served a purpose. The next morning, I called him. He answered on the third ring. "Auntie," he said, voice thick with surprise. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need to reverse something that was never mine to give," I said. He fell silent, then simply replied, "I'll come by this evening." No hesitation, no judgment, just action. That's what I needed now. Quiet, precise action. When Tarek saw the forged documents, he didn't blink. He combed through them like a surgeon, each page revealing how deep the deception had run. They were bold, he muttered, almost with professional curiosity, but not careful. I watched him highlight clauses, circle inconsistencies, note missing witnesses. He brought a satchel filled with templates, legal language, remedies. But more than that, he brought back something I thought I'd lost control. But in the following days, we worked in silence. I signed affidavits, wrote statements, gathered evidence. I remembered everything. The time, the dates, the subtle glances, the slips in conversation. Tarek helped me gather old CCTV footage from the bank, verify signatures, contact past notaries. Every thread they thought they'd tied tight, we began to unravel. And as we built the case, I felt something return inside me. Not joy, not satisfaction, but steadiness. I no longer trembled when I held the teacup. I no longer drifted in thought when folding laundry. I became exact, my eyes sharper, my steps quieter. I even began wearing the clothes I had locked away, the ones I saved for days. I wanted to feel like myself again. The house responded, too. The garden was trimmed, the curtains washed. I repaired the broken clock in the hallway, and it ticked again, not loudly, but with presence, just like me. I didn't tell Layla or Hamza that I knew. I answered their occasional messages with the same dull warmth they'd grown used to. I let them believe I was drifting, distracted, slipping away. That was the beauty of patience. It made them relax. They stopped hiding, they grew careless, and I grew sharper. Revenge, I've come to learn, is not anger unleashed. That's noise, that's fire, easy to see, easy to extinguish. True revenge is the drop of water that hollows stone. It does not scream. It waits. It returns, not with chaos, but with consequence. Revenge is loud only when done by fools. Mine would be silent. At first, nothing seemed to change. The world outside moved with its usual rhythm. Shops opening, children running late to school, neighbors watering dry plants that refused to bloom. But underneath that normalcy, I began to notice the fractures, small at first, like hairline cracks in porcelain. But soon, the cracks grew, and the masks began to slip. Hamza's business, the one he proudly flaunted as his empire, started missing payments. Suppliers stopped calling. One by one, clients pulled out with vague excuses, citing concerns about paperwork irregularities. Tarek had helped file anonymous disclosures. Nothing overt, nothing that could be traced. Just questions raised in the right places, the right whispers at the right time. When your success is built on stolen stones, even the softest wind can collapse the whole house. Layla, on the other hand, seemed untouched at first. She still posted pictures from cafes, still tagged her location at yoga classes and charity dinners. But her eyes, they had changed. The glow was gone. There were rumors her in-laws had discovered inconsistencies in the funds she handled for their trust. Suddenly, dinner invitations stopped. Her name, once greeted with affection, was now mentioned with caution. People didn't confront her, they simply closed their doors. Their calls to me became more frequent, oddly timed, short, filled with brittle laughter and awkward pauses. "Just checking on you," they'd say, but their voices carried the tone of someone trying to confirm if the ground beneath them was still solid. I answered kindly. I asked about their health. I never asked about the things they thought I didn't know. I began walking every morning, past Hamza's office building, where the lights stayed off longer each week, past the boutique Layla once adored, now shut, windows covered in brown paper. The city had not punished them, they had simply begun to drown in the debts of their own design. There's something poetic about watching a storm that you didn't create, but knew would come. You don't cheer when the clouds split. You simply open your window, sip your tea, and listen to the thunder roll in. I passed a cracked mirror once on my way home, tossed near the trash. It reminded me of them, beautiful ones, now useless, and yet it still reflected truth, no matter how broken. I paused, looked into it, and saw not an old woman, but someone returning, someone rising. Sleeplessness began to show in Hamza's eyes. The last time he came by unannounced, I noticed the bags under his lids, the way his hands fidgeted. "Just thought I'd drop off groceries," he said, voiced casual. He forgot I never asked for groceries. I thanked him. Let him talk. Let him pretend it was kindness, not guilt. Layla sent flowers one day, a strange gesture. No note, no context, just lilies, already starting to wilt. I placed them on the kitchen table and watched them droop further by the hour. Beauty cannot survive where intent is rotten. From the shadows of their lives, I watched, not to enjoy their downfall, but to witness the gravity of truth. When you betray the hands that fed you, life has a way of starving you in return, not all at once, but slowly. So you feel each hunger, each thirst, each silence. They thought I disappeared. I was watching from the shadows. It began with a knock, not urgent, not gentle, just ... uncertain, like someone unsure if they had the right to be there. I didn't move right away. I let the sound echo through the hallway, let it pass through the house like wind through a forgotten room. When I finally opened the door, Layla stood there, hair pulled back too tightly, eyes rimmed in smudged makeup, a bouquet of flowers clutched too hard in one hand. She smiled, but her lips trembled at the corners. "Hi, Mama," she said, as if those two words could erase everything. I was in the area. I simply stepped aside. No warmth, no welcome, just space. She entered cautiously, like a guest who remembered once being the owner of the room. She looked around the living room, the same couch she once spilled juice on, the same clock that ticked through her teenage tantrums, but none of it reached her now. She sat, uninvited, and placed the flowers on the table. "I've missed you," she said. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. It sounded more like a question than a confession. I said nothing. I waited. "I know things have been distant, but I've been thinking about you a lot." "We all have." She forced a smile. Hamza talks about you all the time. I raised an eyebrow slightly, just enough to let her know I heard the lie. Then she sighed, a long rehearsed breath meant to signal sincerity. It's been a hard year. Business has been rough. There were some misunderstandings, legal stuff. You know how these things happen. Her eyes searched mine for softness. I kept mine still. Mama, I know we made mistakes, she continued, voice lowering. But you're our mother. We're family. We should be together. We need you. That word, need, clanged against the walls like a dropped plate. Not love, not regret, need. She leaned forward, hand reaching toward mine, hesitating when she felt the air between us had hardened. You look well, she said. Have you been eating properly? Her fingers twitched, unsure if they should touch. I didn't move. The doorbell rang again. Hamza this time, dark circles under his eyes, suit wrinkled at the collar, jaw clenched too tightly. He nodded at me like a nervous intern. Mama, he said, we wanted to come together. We've been talking about everything. Everything. Such a convenient word for people who erased you and now want to pretend it was an accident. We want to make things right, he said, sitting beside his sister, avoiding her eyes. There were decisions made under pressure. You know how life can be. He chuckled dryly, but we're still your children. I studied them as they spoke, not interrupting, not reacting. I watched the way their voices rose and fell, the fake glances at the photo frames, the way they said we miss you without ever saying we're sorry. They talked for 23 minutes. I counted, not because I was waiting for them to stop, but because I wanted to mark how long it took to twist desperation into performance. When they ran out of words, when silence returned to the room, I stood. I'll make tea, I said. They both exhaled, relief loosening their shoulders. But I didn't make tea. I simply stood in the kitchen, back turned, letting the clock tick, letting them sit with the weight of what they had done and what they hadn't said. When I returned, I carried no cups, just my presence. I looked at them not as my children, not as the ones I once bathed and fed and rocked to sleep, but as strangers who had borrowed my love and returned it torn. I listened, not to forgive, but to remember their tone. They came again 3 days later, this time with softer faces, more careful words, and empty hands. No flowers, no gifts, just the same need, disguised now as concern. I let them in, not because I owed them anything, but because I was ready. The living room had already been prepared, not as a trap, but as a courtroom. The files were placed neatly on the table, beside a stack of photocopied letters, account statements, and a single flash drive that held more weight than anything they'd ever said to me. Hamza sat first, adjusting his collar like a man walking into a meeting he didn't prepare for. Layla followed, crossing her legs, fingers clenched in her lap. They expected another round of tea and emotional soft landings, but the air was different this time, still, measured, heavy in a way that couldn't be dismissed. I sat across from them, no smile, no frown, just presence, calm, exacting presence. I've had time to think, I began, my voice smooth but unmoved, about what's mine, and what was taken. They glanced at each other, a flicker of fear disguised as curiosity. I slid the first document toward them. This is the account authorization form from the bank, the one with my forged signature. Layla's fingers twitched. She didn't reach for it. I continued, sliding the next paper. This is the house deed, the one you transferred behind my back. Hamza looked away. This, I said, placing the third sheet, is the updated life insurance beneficiary list. Again, not in my handwriting. And this, I lifted the flash drive gently, like it was something sacred, contains audio recordings of your calls, of your instructions to the notary, of conversations you thought I'd never hear. The silence that followed was not awkward. It was surgical, the kind that cuts deeper than any scream. I wasn't confused, I said. I wasn't slipping. I wasn't old. I was trusting. Layla opened her mouth. Mama, I held up my hand, not to silence her, to spare her. Don't lie, I said. You've already used that voice too many times. Hamza leaned forward slightly. We didn't mean to hurt you. Things got complicated. We were trying to secure yourselves. I finished for him. Plan for your future. Rewrite my present as your entitlement. They looked smaller now. Not like children. Not like adults. Just ... smaller. Like shadows of the people I once held. I spent my life giving you everything, I said. I didn't ask for repayment. Only presence. Only honesty. Layla's eyes were wet now, but no tears fell. What are you going to do? That was the first honest question they'd asked in years. I leaned back, let the sunlight hit the table, illuminating every truth laid bare before them. I've already spoken to the authorities, I said gently. The will has been restored, the deeds reversed, and the legal filings are in motion. There will be consequences, but they won't come from me. They'll come from the systems you tried to cheat. Hamza shook his head slightly. You're our mother. Yes, I said, voice still soft. And you were my children, once. The wind outside rustled the curtains like applause that no one clapped for. I stood, walked to the window, looked at the garden I was finally tending again. You won't be cut off, I said. You'll be corrected. I turned to face them one last time. Calm, exact, entire. Let's discuss how you'll make things right. Justice didn't arrive with sirens or handcuffs. It came in the form of signatures, real ones, this time, on documents neither of them wanted to sign. It came through public notaries who didn't smile, and lawyers who addressed them by full name, not by familiarity. The house was transferred back into my name within 10 days. The bank accounts were frozen, audited, and reset. Everything they had taken was returned, not as a gift, but as a debt repaid. I didn't scream, I didn't gloat. I let the system speak, because when truth has weight behind it, it doesn't need to raise its voice. One of the conditions I placed, written clearly, signed by both, was a letter of apology, not to me, but to their father. A letter they had to read aloud at his grave. I stood at a distance that day, wrapped in a shawl that smelled of memory. While they unfolded the paper with trembling fingers, Hamza's voice cracked as he read the words he probably didn't write. Layla's tears fell in silence, not from sorrow, but from exposure. There's something haunting about being made to confess to a man who can no longer respond. The stones around us listened better than they ever did. They didn't lose their homes. I didn't take their money. I didn't ask for suffering. I asked for truth, for accountability, for the smallest fraction of the dignity they had stripped from me in silence. I made sure the letters of revocation were filed publicly, not to shame them, but to mark the record, to remind them, and everyone who ever tried to blur the lines between love and possession, that even quiet hearts can roar when pushed too far. Their names were gently removed from every document they had once stolen. My fingerprints now sealed every corner they had tried to erase. When neighbors asked, I told them the truth, not cruelly, just plainly. There were mistakes. They've been corrected. That was all. Let them wonder. Let them piece the puzzle through half-glimpsed answers and overheard truths. I didn't owe them explanations, only boundaries. Hamza stopped calling. His pride couldn't survive the echo of his own handwriting on those fraudulent forms. Layla still sends the occasional message, short half-hearted attempts at reconciliation. Hope you're well, she writes. I never reply. My silence is no longer out of pain. It is a decision, a full sentence in itself. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about weight, the kind of weight that sits on a person's chest when they realize the hands they tried to tie are the same hands that once fed them. I still light a candle for them on Fridays, not out of guilt, but out of ritual. I still whisper their names in prayer, not because they deserve it, but because I do. My peace will not be stained with resentment, but make no mistake, I didn't forget. Mercy isn't free. Forgiveness has an invoice. And they paid in silence, not money. It rained the morning everything was finally over. Not a storm, just a quiet, steady drizzle that washed the dust off the windows and softened the edges of the world. I sat by the window with a shawl wrapped around my shoulders, a cup of warm tea in my hands, and no voices in the house but my own breath. The silence no longer a burden, it had become something holy. The house felt different now, still old, still creaky in places, but alive again. The garden had begun to bloom, timid at first, then bold, as if even the flowers had waited for truth to return before showing their faces. I spoke to them sometimes, not aloud, just in passing, and they answered by blooming anyway. On the living room shelf sat a single frame, a black and white photo of my husband holding Layla and Hamza when they were little, his eyes full of pride, the children grinning without fear. I picked it up with gentle hands, not to mourn, but to remember. We had done our best. He and I, we had given more than we ever had to spare. And though it ended in sorrow, it also began in love. I visited his grave that week. The grass was long, the sky overcast. I brought no flowers,